Good evening, and welcome to Human Potentials. My name is George Heisler, and this evening I have Tom Bolden from Poughkeepsie, and Tom is a instructor of Arnis, which is a martial art that's a little different than the other martial arts in its training and in its approach. And we're going to talk a little bit about the philosophy of Arnis and why it's popular today. And then we're going to have a demonstration. So Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about yourself, Tom, personally and professionally, and how you got involved in martial arts.
Well, I go back a little bit. I'm not originally from New York. I was born down south. I was raised in Savannah, and I ended up in this area as an employee of IBM back some 22 years ago. I was raised on a farm, so I'm a farm boy. Okay. I got involved in martial arts formally. I had always goofed around with it as a kid from the time I was about 15. But I went in the Marine Corps at 18, and that's when I first got exposed to it, some of the Marine Corps hand-to-hand combat. And then I was stationed in Hawaii, and that's the place where I got involved with Arnis and some of the Chinese martial arts at that point.
What Chinese martial arts?
I studied a Chinese form called Chinese Kempo, which is like Kung Fu, and very similar, as a matter of fact, to Arnis in the philosophy, in that it's a very fluid kind of a martial art based on something that we call flow.
Yeah, I know you had a little seminar down at Schenectady Community College. It was a very good turnout for it, too. And I took that seminar, and I found it to be very interesting because the approach is something that you explained at the seminar was that in a lot of martial art forms, they start you out with a lot of katas and different things, and you practice for 5 years, and then they say, well, okay, now we're going to give you a little lesson in weapons. Where Arnis started out immediately with weapons.
Oh yeah, that's very true, and that goes back. A lot of people don't understand that when we look back at our history, and as near as we can tell from research, probably the first tools or weapons that mankind used were sticks and stones. And they used those because of the
availability.
Not only that, because we are inferior in strength. They needed something as leverage to fight off wild animals. So later on, as they started to develop more the martial forms, especially empty hand, they went back to what they knew. They knew how to use a stick, and they just translated that really to empty hand movement. And that's the natural way of doing it, really. So it comes from it's a natural kind of a process. You are right. Most systems, you start off, you spend maybe 5-6 years doing all of the empty hand stuff. Then they said, okay, we're going to do weapons now. And the problem is, it makes it twice as tough. If you start off doing the weapons first of all, you're dealing with something that's an extension of your hand. Usually the weapon is a lot longer than your arms would normally be. So you have to learn to exist in space with the weapon. So once you put that weapon down, it's a lot easier now to adapt that to hand movements. The hand movements are exactly the same. So, it's a lot easier to move your hands without something in them once you're used to doing movements with a weapon. So this is kind of the philosophy of it. Basically, Arnis is and when I tell people this, they look at me and they say, oh, this is interesting. Arnis is a fencing system. And when I tell people that, they just can't believe it. But what they don't understand is most of your major grappling systems, you talk about jiu-jitsu, judo, aikido, all come from sword system or fencing systems. And all you do is you take the fencing movements and you translate them to devastating empty hand, locking, throwing, things like that. And that's some of what you saw me demonstrate and try to relate at the seminar that you attended.
Now Arnis is a Philippine.
Arnis is a Filipino martial art, unlike Taekwondo being Korean, Kung Fu Chinese, Karate is Japanese. It is Filipino. The thing that's interesting about it, though, unlike a lot of the other martial arts, there is a tie-in and influence from the Western countries, which kind of makes it different. The Spanish, when they invaded the Philippines in the 16th century, they had a system that they call Spanish sword and dagger or Spanish sword and shield. And Arnis, because of the way it's based on a system called flow, which is the ability to look at the opponent, determine based on basic signals how he's going to move and pick up the movements and the techniques. So when the Spanish invaded the Philippines in the 16th century, the same as they had done all over the world, they were surprised, because they had never faced a foe that was able to adapt so readily to their techniques. So what they did, they picked up the techniques of the Spanish and used them against them. And that's how you got a lot of the Spanish or European influence in the fighting techniques, unlike a lot of the other systems.
A question I have now, why was it unique to the Filipinos that they were able to do this and not other cultures, or were other cultures?
Well, it's just the philosophy of Arnis itself. See, most Asian martial arts are very strict in that, okay, this is the way you do a technique, and they are technique-oriented arts, okay? Against a certain type of attack, this is the way you defend, and they're very strict about that. Whereas Arnis is not an art form that's based on technique so much as it is based on principle and philosophy. Once you understand the principle and philosophy, it's very loose in that you can apply it almost any way you see fit. And that's the main difference. They use this idea, and when they do that, they can pick up anything. They don't care about technique. I'll use techniques from any system as long as I can apply the philosophy. And basically that has to do with the way they move, the movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was kind of Bruce Lee's philosophy, too.
Bruce Lee had that philosophy somewhat in that, okay, if I look at any other martial art and I see something useful, yes, I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to use it. I'm not going to be strict in that, hey, this is a part of another system, I don't want to use it. You're right.
Now, you have an Arnis school, do you? I know you're doing something here in the capital.
I have an Arnis. I used to have an art school. Let's put it that way. To go back a little bit, when I came up here, as I said, 22 years ago, in 1983, I was the first person in the Hudson Valley area to teach Arnis and introduce it. Then in 1987, down in Highland, New York, I started the first formal Arnis school in New York State. And I ran that school until about a year ago, when I disassociated myself with that because I wanted to get out, do more seminars, and spread it on a more global level. And that's what I'm trying to do now, is spread it to the public. So I found I could do that better if I got out of the school situation and went on the road.
Now, I know I saw that in the class the seminar that I took. It was very easy to adapt to this. And I remember one gal said something about, well, what happens if I don't have a stick in my hand? You know, like, if I'm opening my car door and I'm being attacked or something. How would one apply the techniques of Arnis in that situation?
That is a common comment. People always say, well, you know, this Arnis seems like super stuff, but hey, you're not going to walk around with a stick all the time. And I say, no problem. You know, I go back to what I said earlier about fencing. You know, it's a built-in system, but once you learn the movements of fencing, it's just a matter of doing the same movements with empty hand. And the other thing that's interesting about it, once you learn to use any weapon, one weapon, all weapons are used the same. You know, we practice with sticks or swords, but you could use keys just as effectively. You could use a pen, a comb, a shoe, a belt, anything. So it's just a matter of doing the same movements that you learn doing the fencing techniques. Yeah.
Okay. Do you, I mean, with the training, I know you train slowly and that sort of thing. Now, in a real life situation, does it tend to, things tend to slow down if you're in a combative situation, in terms of, from your perspective? Do you see the movements where the person is taking a swing at you or trying to hit you with something? Yes.
One of the strong points of Arnis, or features of Arnis, I might say, is that we learn to read the opponent an awful lot. We watch the movement, the point from which the movement stems. For instance, it's impossible, for instance, to move your arm without moving your shoulder. So we key on looking at the shoulder, which tells us that the person is going to move the arm, for instance. It's impossible to kick without unweighting the leg that you're going to kick with. So we'll watch that. So a lot of it has to do with predicting or reading what the opponent is going to do before you affect your own technique. So, and you also learn to move with the opponent because you're able to see what he's going to do.
Yeah. So by the time they do that, you're prepared.
Sure. If you look, for instance, at movement that starts at the shoulder, in martial arts time, the movement starting at the shoulder, but by the time the hand moves in martial arts time, it's really an eternity in martial arts time, a defense time, from the time the shoulder moves until the time, for instance, the hand would actually move. Sure.
Now, how come people are just hearing about this? I've been familiar with Arnis and Eskrima. And I don't think we clarified this, but this is Filipino stick fighting is what we're talking about. And I've been familiar with it. But how come people are just now becoming more aware of it?
Well, unlike the Japanese and the Koreans, I guess if you look back at those martial arts, karate was first introduced in this country around 1952 by a Japanese master named Master Oyama, if I'm correct on that. And same with the Korean martial arts. You had an awful lot of the servicemen go over. They learned martial arts in Korea and they brought them back. The Filipinos, however, have been very strict on not teaching non-Filipinos. And it was just only in the last 15 years that my teacher, for instance, and he's responsible for this, Grandmaster Ramey Praces, came to this country in 1976, and he says, I'm going to teach it to the American public. And he started it, and from that point on, everybody's kind of jumped on the bandwagon. And once people found out the training method and how this stuff works, it's been growing ever since.
Yeah, I found it very simple to pick up, and I took your advice and went home and practiced the next day.
That's good.
And I found that it was, because I have done some other martial arts, but I was able to pick it up very quickly, and I can see where you became confident in the art almost immediately.
Well, unlike a lot of other martial arts where you have to learn a lot of awkward, unnatural movements, Arnis is a natural martial art, if you remember from the seminar. Right. Everything is based on natural movement. It's just a natural progression. And people look at me and they say, Sifu, this is amazing. Stuff is totally natural. And that's the key. That's what makes it so popular and what makes it so effective. You don't have to learn any strange, awkward, unnatural type movements to do this. Anybody can do it. No matter how old you are, if you're in reasonably good shape, you can do it. Anybody can do it. Old people, young people, women, especially women, it's great for them because it's a finesse-oriented art. It involves a lot of use of physics, and you don't have to be extremely strong to do it. So you apply principles of physics a lot.
Now, you just touched on all the people that can benefit from that. And how can older people and women especially benefit?
Well, older people, for instance, one thing about older people, a lot of times older people, for instance, carry around canes, and of course we train with sticks. So it's very appropriate for them. If they learn Arnis techniques, they have the weapon right there with them. Women, for instance, carry around all kinds of devastating weapons. They don't really think about it. They carry around, they wear spiked heels. When you learn Arnis techniques, if you were to use one of those things against an opponent, he'd be in trouble. Okay? They carry around fingernail files, again, which is like a knife. And we train, it's a blade system, as you said, and a stick fighting system. So we can adapt readily a fingernail file as a knife, for instance. So they carry around an awful lot of weapons. Not only that, as I said before, women tend to have a lot of finesse, and it's a finesse-oriented art. And because of the physics, they can use it without worrying about strength and worrying about the size of the opponent.
I know that it's it was again, I keep referring back to my experience with it, that it was very effective. I was working with a small blonde woman, and she whacked me a couple of times with a stick. She was pretty effective with it, that's what I remember.
Well, that's the other thing now about Arnis. You learn a weapon, and the whole idea is once you learn a weapon, the thing that's interesting about it, anywhere you strike an opponent with a weapon, you're going to hurt him. That's the first thing. And the other thing that's different about Arnis, for instance, than other martial systems, the philosophy is, in order for a person to attack you, the person, I'm going to have to attack you by reaching to grab you or trying to hit you or trying to kick you. So I have to extend some mechanism in order to do that. And the idea of Arnis is to destroy the mechanism that used to attack me. We call it destroying the fangs. It's like defanging a rattlesnake. Right. If you defang a rattlesnake, it's like a nice pet. And this is the same with Arnis. If you destroy the hands and the limbs and the legs, there's nothing that the opponent can do to you. And that's the basic idea. We don't worry about going to the head or hitting the person in the body, all of that. The person has to reach for you or has to kick at you or something, and once he does that, he's playing right into your hands. You put them out there, I'm going to break them off. I'm going to destroy them, so you can't attack me
do it again.
Further.
Yeah. Now, what do you see as the future of Arnis? What?
I think that, and a lot of people believe this, the experts, I think that Arnis is the martial arts for the 90s into the year 2000, because it is a system that you can learn very fast. If you practice this art and you're diligent about it for, say, 6 months to a year, you can be extremely effective at defending yourself. And this is one of the things that people are getting back to. A lot of people, they study Taekwondo and a lot of other systems. The problem with those systems, they're good systems. I don't down other systems because I'm certified in a lot of those systems. But a lot of the systems, a lot of the martial techniques have been taken out. A lot of the systems have been relegated to sport. So they are not that effective. And Arnis is, the way we train in Arnis makes it effective. We train from the beginning, and you know that from the seminar. Yeah. The minute you go to a seminar, we put a weapon in your hand, we do no forms. Right away, you start interacting with an opponent. That's one of the reasons why you can learn it so effectively and so quickly. Yeah. And I think that the future of Arnis is very bright. I think that in the next few years, you're going to see that Arnis is going to be the major martial art that people are going to be practicing.
Yeah, well, that would make sense because a lot of it is still pure in terms of,
sure.
Has not been made into a sport like, karate has been, and judo and some of the other ones. However, they still seem to be effective systems. And I would guess, though, you would have to go to China to study, like the purer forms of Kung Fu.
Well, Kung Fu now, unlike, say, for instance, Karate and, for instance, maybe Taekwondo, Kung Fu still maintains a lot of the martial aspects. It's just that a lot of the techniques are hidden, and a lot of the masters won't teach you the hidden techniques. So you learn a lot of these forms, and you don't really know how to use them. Right. I know people who've studied, for instance, Kung Fu, and I studied Kung Fu myself. You study Kung Fu 10 years, and you learn all of these fancy forms, and then someone asks you, well, what does that movement mean? How do you use that? Well, I don't know. My Sifu didn't teach me yet. That's the problem. It's not that the techniques are not there in a lot of the systems. It's just that the instructors haven't revealed to the students how to use them. Whereas Arnis, we don't hide anything. Right away, we start to teaching you how to use these techniques, what they're used for, what they're meant for.
Yeah. Well, I know the way violence has increased in this country, and just yesterday I had some, little kid mouth off to me, and he invited me to come outside, and he was going to kick my butt. So I decided I'd save his life yesterday, and ignore it. But I think that's just evidence of. Now this kid was probably 12, 13 years old, and when he's 18, 19, 20 years old, he's still going to have this mouth on him, and he might be bigger and a lot more aggressive. And I can see that that in the future, the society that we live in may become even more violent than it is today. And it would make sense that you would have some kind of a martial arts system to defend yourself.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the reasons why so many people are getting involved in martial arts today. And there's that reason. As you said, there is so much violence, and people realize the need to protect themselves. But then there's the health aspect also. We are a very health-conscious society today, and there are also those benefits to Arnis. It's a very aerobic kind of a martial art, and the popularity of aerobics. This art is, as I said, very aerobic, so that is all built into it. I was talking the other day, for instance, to a lady, and she said, well, how old are you? And I would say, I shouldn't say this on TV, about my age, right? She said, how old are you? And I says, I'm 49. And she says, what? And I took that opportunity to tell her. I says, well, if you practice a system like Arnis, which has flow elements to it, and a lot of the same aspects and philosophies as, for instance, Tai Chi, which are health type of arts, these are the benefits that you receive from doing it.
Yeah.
So there are those benefits also.
Yeah, there is a lot. I've been working a little bit with Qigong recently.
Mm-hmm.
And, know,
Very good.
Flowing the Qi,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And, you see, there's a big difference. I noticed there was a big difference in when I started working with Qigong. I was walking down the street one day, and my toe caught on the edge of the sidewalk, how it does sometimes, and I stumbled. And instead of falling forward, I jumped in the air.
Right.
It was automatic response.
Sure.
To compensate for that motion.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't realize until after it happened that my body had just, instead of falling forward, jumped up in the air. And so it's true that, once you kind of get in harmony with your own energy sources and forms, that different things you're more agile and you respond to situations much differently.
And we developed, when we practice Arnis, and this is true of other martial arts, the key to becoming proficient at any martial art is repetition. Constantly repeat the movements, and we develop something that we call muscle memory, and it becomes instinctive. And in your case, you didn't think about it anymore. You just kind of did it, and that was because of the repetition that you'd probably engaged in the practice of it.
I had a instructor one time, and he used to, when you'd get tired, you'd be doing all that, and you'd start getting tired, and then he'd say, "Okay, now you're going to start to learn," because when you're tired, the body begins to remember, better than it does when you're not. So, so that's the muscle memory that you're talking about.
And that's what's very important to have developed it at that level. If you're actually in an encounter where you need to use it, you don't have time to think, well, okay, now I went to this seminar, I took this class, and they said, okay, if the opponent attacks me this way, or if I'm involved in this situation, I should do this. You don't have time. It just has to happen naturally, and that's where the repetition helps. If you do this stuff thousands of times, automatically you key right into what the opponent is going to do, and you just respond.
Yeah.
And that's an absolute requirement.
Yeah, I did notice that too in the little seminar that we were doing. You started to be able to tell when people were going to do things and how to respond to different things. We've got about 5 minutes left, and what I'd like to do is maybe we could do a little demonstration, and then we'll do another show next week if you'd like.
Okay.
And then we'll go into more depth on Arnis and more demonstration of that.
Okay.
So, while we get set up now, you're on.
We've talked during the show about Arnis being a fencing system and how we're able to take fencing movements and translate those movements to empty hand. What I want to do now is demonstrate some of the fencing movements, and then I'll translate those for you. I also talked about the ability in Arnis to read what the opponent is going to do by reading the movement. For instance, if the opponent would start to strike at me with the right hand, first thing he has to do is cock the weapon. So he tells me right away that the strike is coming from the forehand. So I have a lot of information there, and I have a lot of advantage. So when he strikes, if I can evade that and pass it across with my knife or my sword or my stick, I can pass it into the weapon and create a devastating effect on his arm. Remember, I talked about the whole idea of destroying the fang, and this is what this technique is about. So he feeds it, I will destroy it. He tries to come back, I'll destroy it. If he comes low, I'll pass it and destroy it, and I'll pass it and destroy it. This is a stick, or it represents a knife, or it could represent any other weapon. Other things that I can do with this, in addition to destruction, I can create throwing techniques with the cane, locking techniques, anything I want to do. So if the opponent would feed me his strike, I can pass this doing destruction and create a locking technique. So I take him down in a locking kind of maneuver. I can disarm the weapon just as easily. He feeds this, I pass it, I do the disarm, and I can follow up with a striking technique. Empty hand would be the same. That's the thing I want to talk about, how to translate this to empty hand. He can use this. Go ahead and use the stick. Use the stick. It doesn't matter. That's the thing that's important. If he feeds me, I can still do this the same way. By passing this empty hand, if he comes back, I can do the same thing. He comes back again, I can do the same kind of destruction and the same kind of locking technique with this. I can do disarms the same way. If he comes at me, I can pass this, disarm this, and do throwing techniques off of this. All the same way. These are all movements.
Do that again, Sifu. I didn't get it.
Okay. So remember, I'm translating what we just demonstrated with the cane. I'm now demonstrating this empty hand. And I'm going to translate this to a disarming, this is the disarm, and a throwing technique, all empty hand. Okay. Let's just try it so you can see the drill translated. He feeds me forward, back, he feeds low. And anytime I want to break out of this, at this point, this is what we call flow. I'm just flowing with the opponent, keeping my rhythm with the opponent here, this way. I can pass this. This is the disarm again. There's the throw again, like that. Okay.
Now that was called Bandi, wasn't it?
That was for Bandi. We call this technique Bandi. What I can also do with this is I can do blocking techniques and counter techniques, and I can do the same kind of techniques with empty hands. So if he feeds me a forehand strike again, I see that he's going to feed me from forehand. What I want to do is get out of the path of the attack and affect some kind of a counter. So if he feeds me, I can block this, and I can strike many times against the opponent. If he feeds the other way, again, I see that it's coming, block it, strike many times this way. With the same thing, empty hand though. If he feeds me again, I can strike this, boom, boom, this way, throw it, pow, 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 this way. Let's do that a little bit slower so you can see it, right? So he feeds me again, the same technique as I demonstrated with the cane. I can strike, I can do the destruction, throwing, follow up. So you start to see that everything that I'm doing with the cane, I can do with the empty hand. This is the important thing about Arnis. And this is why anybody can use it. It could be keys, it could be anything. We go back to the Bandi technique. I'll pick up my cane again. In addition to destroying the limb, I could just as easily pass this and make contact with the head. Or if he comes high, I could just as easily pass this and make contact with the ribs. Or pass this and make contact with the legs. If this is a pair of keys, you can start to see how this would be equally effective. I don't have keys in my hand, but just imagine a set of keys here. So if he feeds me high, I could pass this and do destruction with the keys against the sensitive parts of the arm. If he feeds me low, I can pass this and do destruction with the keys against the face. And I can also strike back. You can imagine how this would be very devastating. Strike against the arm with keys, striking back to the face with keys. Very, very devastating technique. But the important thing is the same techniques as used with the cane, empty hand, or any weapon. That's the important thing about it. The next thing I want to do, next thing I want to do is another flow drill. It's a drill that we use for coordination and develop speed and reflexes. If he feeds me high, I'll block this, I'll feed him a strike, he feeds me. Okay, but the thing about this, the same technique again works empty hand. We can do this same drill, empty hand. Same drill, empty hand. So if he feeds me high, this would be my empty hand block. And I could go right into some counter technique. If he feeds me the next strike, which is here, I can block this and still go into some countering technique with throwing if I want. But this all comes from the drill that I just performed with.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tom. We're running out of time, but next week we're gonna do another show with Tom, and it's gonna be a little bit reversed. We're gonna do about 5 minutes of talking, and the rest of the show will be all on demonstration. My name is George Heisler. This has been Human Potentials. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.